I'll just go over some of the ground rules and some of the issues and some of the things we're going on with our second DC Statehood Autonomy forum here. This forum was created based on the fact that when I ran, nobody had forums, so I started creating them to make them happen, and this is how I created it. But it's going to be one of the forums that go on throughout the city, I feel, because we are in Ward 8, we're in a very symbolic place, and I think it has a great meaning to everybody that comes here. Now, there's going to be no campaigning or cheering for the candidates when they're up on the podiums speaking. The candidates will have a 3-minute opening. They'll have 1 minute to reply to any of the questions. Then, after the panel finishes, we're going to go to the floor. The floor can be open to ask questions. In the form of a question, they have 30 seconds only to submit their question verbally to the candidate, all the candidates, not one. You can't direct it to one candidate. Then, what we're going to do is we will have a 1-minute closing at the end, and it'll work up in that manner. So what we'll do is we'll give another 5 minutes, and then we'll start into this. I think it should be pretty interesting. I put together some pretty good questions. I'm sure Anise has done the same. And I'm interested in your responses and see how we can make our government work better for the people of the District of Columbia and the residents, and make this city work for us for a change. Thank you, and let's get started. So we'll start with Ms. Silverman first with her 2-minute opening. I mean 3-minute opening.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll think of 3 more things to say. So good evening. Thank you for coming. My name is Elissa Silverman, and you know, I think the biggest question that gets asked of me is, why are you running? And you know, I am tired of waking up in the morning and opening the Post and reading about the things that captivate our press, like fully loaded SUVs and contract meddling and shadow campaigns. I think that's a distraction from the big issues that our city really faces and that we really need to focus on. I think those issues are things like how we close the achievement gap with our kids in our public schools, how we close what I would consider an opportunity gap with our families, and how we grow our city in an inclusive, I think, productive way. Now, some of you might know, you know, this was an unexpected candidacy. I 5 years ago thought I'd be still covering these kind of events instead of being a participant in them. I'm a former reporter. Folks who go to the Ward 8 Dems meetings know me from my coverage as loose lips. I worked for the city paper for 6 or 7 years, 3 years as loose lips during the second term of the Williams administration. And then I went to the Washington Post, where I covered business in Fairfax County and the 2006 mayoral and chairman's race. And then I covered crime on the night shift at the Post for almost about 2 years. And then it seemed like there wasn't that rosy an outlook in the journalism business, and so I went to an even more lucrative field in public policy. And I've spent the past 3.5 years working for a group called the DC Fiscal Policy Institute. And at DCFPI focuses on the budget and how it impacts mostly working class, I'd say everyone, but particularly working class families in our city. And my role there was on a policy level is to focus on the city's workforce development programs, how we get people into jobs, how we leverage our federal and local funds. I think that's of particular interest to where we are tonight, because as everyone knows, Ward 8 has the most number of people who are looking for jobs but can't get them. And I think we can do better with our workforce development funding. So I want to thank you all, and I look forward to the forum.
Okay. Next, Matthew.
My name is Matthew Frumin. They say that showing up is 95% of life, so I think the 3 of us did great. Just got to get that last 5%. Everyone faces the same question that Elissa referred to. Why are you doing this? And for me, I haven't, over the years, I've always been committed to public service and community service, but it has become increasingly local in recent years, in the last 5 years. I've served on our ANC 3E. I played a very active role in the modernization of Wilson High School. I moved from that to working on education issues at Wilson and then education issues citywide. Those of you who go to education meetings here in this part of the city know me from my attendance at those meetings and my activism on those issues. I'm also on the mayor's task force on undergrounding power lines. And I am on the board of Teens Run DC, which is a mentoring and fitness program for high school students in public and charter schools around the city. I've been working on the Senior Advisory Council on senior issues in Ward 3, again exposing me to issues that seniors face around the city. What I have found and what has been very gratifying for me is I've been able to make a difference. I am honest. I work hard, I listen to what people have to say, I find creative solutions, and I get things done. And that is what I want to bring to the City Council. Now, what are those things that I want to get done? The theme of my campaign is, let's grow together. I find the growth in the city exciting, but the growth can go in different directions, and we have to make sure that the growth works in a way that benefits all communities and that brings us together. So what does that mean? For me, given my activism on school issues, we need great local matter-of-right schools in every neighborhood. We simply have to commit to do that. And if it takes more in some places to achieve that goal than it does in other places, well, then we have to invest to make that happen everywhere in the city. It's a fundamental equity issue. And it's an issue that is key to the strength of communities. I also am committed to affordable housing, investment in infrastructure in a way that can create jobs for DC residents. One of the things I've done recently is working with the Washington Interfaith Network on infrastructure projects designed to create jobs for returning citizens. And we must meet the needs and create opportunities for that very big part of our population, 10%. We need to work for returning citizens and all of our citizens.
Thank you. Perry?
Good evening. I'm Perry Red, Ward 4 resident and candidate for this seat on City Council. I'm here before you, pleased to be in Ward 8. This is our first forum in Ward 8, and my understanding, it won't be the last. I'm very glad of that. Tonight we're here to talk about statehood for DC. I am the DC Statehood Green Party candidate in this race, which represents something this city is lacking, and that's democracy. Simply put, we have a heavily weighted Democratic council, and we tend to fall into the rut of ruling with one-party rule, ruling in a manner that disenfranchises the other sectors of the population in the city. So I'm running to, one, bring democracy to the DC Council. Two, to continue the civil rights work left void when Hilda Mason left the council in '98, the work of Julius Hobson prior to that. So our hopes is that we can continue a legacy of bringing parity in the city. As our city intensely gentrifies, we find that wealth disparity is growing ever wider. And if indeed we're a moral people, then we would want to do something to rectify that. Well, we can't keep doing the same thing, expecting a different result. We are running away downhill toward the gap between the haves and the have-nots. And it's just not healthy for a secular economy to operate that way. Why am I running? I'm running because I want to see statehood for DC. I'm against disenfranchisement of any any part of our population, including people who are homeless. We just saw that happen during a challenge to the petitions by one of the candidates in the race who's no longer on the ballot. So we want to make sure that that doesn't happen to any resident of our city. We're running because we want employable working DC residents. What we've had is a consistent lack of employable DC residents, so that corporations would comply with our first source law. We're running because we want to see tax justice for the majority of residents. We have a regressive tax structure, and we want to see a progressive one. And we're running because we want effective assimilation for returning citizens. I being one, the improbable candidate, but knowing that we have 70,000 returning citizens, and I can bring justice to that. Thanks a lot, man.
All right, thank you. I like to say it really is nice to get to speak 3 minutes, isn't it? You don't get cut off, and you can really get something out, and you have to add on a little bit more to keep it going, which is great. So that's a good thing about giving the candidate 3 minutes, because I was one, and I do appreciate that 3 minutes. It really lets you get your voice out there. Next, I'd like to say that, last week that we had a tribute paid to one of the main founders of our party, Hilda Mason. There was a street named after her in Northwest Washington, and I'd have to say that, she is the longest elected member on the DC City Council at large. Even though Jack Evans says that he never ran in an at-large race, and he never stayed as an at-large candidate and win in those races. It's different to win a ward race, but a big difference to win an at-large race. So I think nobody will ever beat that record, and I could pay tribute to her and say God bless her for everything she did for the statehood movement in the city in her time. Next, I'm going to let Anise start off with the questioning and go from there.
Hello.
Right. Hello, welcome candidates. Since this is titled the DC Statehood Autonomy Candidates Can Debate, I would like to know specifically, what do you have in your campaign literature that you are currently distributing about DC statehood? Do you have anything? First of all, do you have your literature? Can you hold it up and point out what you have about DC statehood in your literature? If you do have it, what do you plan to organize to get support? And if you don't, why don't you have statehood in your literature?
I think, I'm not sure if it's the literature or the website, but there's a reference to we need to get to a place where we have all the rights.
Grab two.
Yeah, and where all of our children have the full voting rights that come to statehood. Just a reference to the aspirations.
And what do you plan to do to achieve that? Just give me one or two actionable things that you plan to do once you get on the council.
One, lead by example that can increase confidence that we should get statehood. Lobby Congress and sponsor things that will promote, advertise the idea of the injustice of us not having statehood to audiences outside of DC.
Perry?
Sure, and yes, I do. As a DC Statehood Green candidate, that is paramount. Matter of fact, it's coming in. I make sure that that's the lead thing. For me, statehood is the most important thing. It's sort of like slavery, we say we want jobs. Well, as long as there was slavery, there were always jobs. So it's not always a good thing it's not always a good thing to be in the game but still be disenfranchised. And that's what lack of statehood is. Basically, we get to go to Congress. We got a person in there, but that person doesn't have a right to vote. So,
Two actionable things that you can do.
Sure, absolutely. Number one, reinstatement and fully fund the Statehood Commission. That is one of the most important elements that we have in organizing base, the clearinghouse of sorts, right here in the city. The other actionable piece is outreach to the 50 states. And that outreach would look like helping the concerned parties within the other 49, or the other 50 states, and Puerto Rico, which has moved towards statehood already, but to work with them to hold conventions in their states. And of course, relate the importance of equality as citizens of the United States. So those are the two actionable pieces there.
Actually, no, I'm sorry about that.
So you got me, Anise. I did not see serious.
Could you speak a little louder, please?
I said, you got me.
I mean, so they can hear, I can hear you.
I don't, I just took a look, and.
And why don't you?
I don't have a good answer for you on that. I don't, I should. You know, in terms of the actions, you know, number one, and I've said this before, I think I want to make sure we have a statehood strategy, and I'm a grassroots organizer, that's my background. So what I'm interested in doing, I think we need to have a tactical strategy about how we get the votes in Congress. And then I see a way of doing it, to do that, is really having a ground game in those congressional districts to make sure that those congressmen feel the pressure of statehood. And because my impression from talking to people, especially when you have people visit, is they don't realize that we don't have voting rights. So I think there's an education component, but I think also, I mean, I do, you know, I'm a budget person. I do support the budget autonomy amendment. I don't think it's enough though, because I still think that we're tied to having congressional approval over dollars that we raise locally.
So do you have two actionable things that you would do to achieve statehood, once you are elected?
Work with the DC Statehood Coalition and all the groups to have a strategy of how we do a grassroots campaign in the field, in districts, to get a vote, to achieve statehood. And two, I think that involves like funding, really funding an education campaign on the issue.
Thank you.
And just to answer your question.
Yeah, you should do it.
I think you get that by just being there at the party.
Well, we have Michael Brown, our senator here, our senator, until Johnny Barnes is here to fill in. So this way we'll have a three-panel moderator in that proceeding. There's a Pat if you want to come up with questions or something you can think about. He's also a strong advocate for statehood for the District of Columbia. Has done a lot and has worked hard endlessly for our cause to become our 51st state, and I think that, you know, he has a lot he could say about this too. Well, I'm going to go with the next question. Basically, I'd like to know, how long should the CBE companies that do contract in the district, how long should they have the right to do business in the district, and what percentage of their workforce should be DC residents? So it's a two-part question.
I think we need to have contracting reform in the city, and I think that we need, you know, it's been very clear from the stories that have been written that we need to take a really good look at how we do contracting. But I do think it's important from an economic perspective to make sure that small and local businesses have a chance to compete for contracts in our city. Because we know that when a business is local, those dollars stay here. But I do support contracting reform. I would like to, you know, this has been my approach on a wide range of issues. Like on the CBE issue, I would like to take a look at best practices in other cities, how they do it, where we are sort of askew, and really, you know, figure out who does this well, and then, you know, do it the way they do it.
And then, what percentage of employees should be DC residents in the last 5 seconds?
Well, I'd like to see 100% of employees from companies
But realistically,
be DC residents. Well, the target targets are hard, because I do think that, what we need to do, and this is what I've worked on in workforce development, is we're not training people for the jobs that are available right now. We need to use the community college as a pipeline to train people for jobs. And we know what those jobs are. They're in hospitality, they're in healthcare. I just spent the morning with a bunch of tech workers. That's a growing sector.
Time. Okay.
I wish I could claim that I was an expert on the mechanics of how this works in the district right now. Honestly, I'm not an expert in how the CBE program works. I do think that clearly we have to have a goal of getting business opportunities to small businesses and to communities that haven't had the same kinds of opportunities. And in looking at any program or looking at any changes to any program, my question would be, how effective is it and how can it be made to be more effective? I think Elissa's right that in terms of a requirement of how many of the workers should be DC residents, there's two sides to that coin. You do have to train people so they can fill those jobs. And if we are training people to fill those jobs, it's 100%. So maybe it's an approach where you start with something that is, in your word, realistic, but you're driving towards a goal while you're doing it with the other hand in terms of training of 100%.
Perry?
Sure. As far as non-compliance with our existing first source law, for example, I believe penalties should be assessed. Everything from the stripping of tax abatements, clawbacks. I'm committed to the fact that the benefits for corporations are so great in this city that there's no excuse for not complying. Workers are hurt in the city when they don't. As far as the percentage of DC residents, I think it should be at least 51%. I believe the corporations have a responsibility in training as well when they benefit as great as they do in the city. And Ms. Silverman said the targets are hard. Yes, they may be, but targets are not impossible. So the fact of the matter is, we set them and then we reach them. And if indeed corporations are not working with the city, and of course the city's fell down too with its training, workforce development training and such, but we're the candidate in this race with a plan to reach those targets.
Can I suggest that we start at a different place?
I'm just right now, I'm just getting started, warmed up, so it is going to change.
No, just not make the same person answer first.
All right.
I agree.
Michael, do you have something you'd like to ask the candidates?
Sure. First of all, let me say how honored I am to sit in for Johnny Barnes, since I'm a mere shadow of the man. But and hopefully he'll get here soon. But if this question has been asked, I apologize.
Okay, then I'll go first.
But recently there has been legislation proposed to allocate $1.1 million to the congressional delegation here in the district and the city council in order to pursue statehood next year. Would you may not be familiar with the legislation, so I won't ask you to comment on that particular piece of legislation, but if elected, would you push for at least $1 million a year in funding to help our effort to make the district of the 51st state? Matt, you want to go first?
I got an easier one. Yes, I would. I mean, I think it's not exactly the question that was asked before, but what are the kinds of things that we would do was something that we were all asked, and all of us, I think, were saying we want to support ways to get the message out around the country. Everybody, not actually everybody, but most people who live in the district are converts on this issue. The question is, how do we persuade people in other places? And the fact is, it takes resources and people to do it. There are people in the private sector or the non-governmental sector who are doing it, but let's have our elected officials out there doing it.
Well, my answer, of course, is yes. In late January, I went on WPFW's Politics Hour, and I was asked, what's the first legislation that you would introduce once you're elected? And the Statehood Commission was my first choice. I do support Councilman Orange's proposal. I would, of course, put more meat on those bones. I mean, I believe in it that much. There are people in this city who will do it for free. And
Yeah,
I'm looking right at
I've
them.
met a few of them.
Exactly. And so I know that the commitment is there from the leaders. Money seems to move people in this city, sad to say, but money seems to move folks. But more importantly than that, money is a catalyst for us moving this drive outside the city. This is a national issue. When we talk about people being constitutionally disenfranchised, it's a national issue. So my answer is yes.
Time.
So I think if we're going to have a shadow delegation, that we should fully fund it, and that, but as a council member, as your at-large council member, I am going to ask how that money should be spent. And I'm gonna apply my same principles of asking hard questions about what that money is going toward that I would ask on an economic development project, or I would ask about the community partnership where we give our homeless money. So I would want to make sure that if that $1 million, there's a strategic plan for how we're spending it, and what is the end, what is the goal for that year with those dollars.
Thank you. Elise, and you can pick whoever you'd like to go first, but it has to be into the whole panel.
All right. I guess I'll start with Perry. Senator Edward Kennedy introduced our first statehood bill along with Ron Dellums in the House. And he is famous for having said the reason that statehood is so difficult to get for DC is the 4 twos. It is too black, too urban, too progressive, and too Democrat. I'd like you to address those issues. Do you think that is still, those are still the major problems for getting support for DC statehood throughout the country? And if you think those are still the problems, how would you address those problems?
Well, I can identify with 3 of those tools. And factually speaking, I remember Ron Dellums when I was a child on this fight, along with my father, right over here off Southern Avenue, fighting for statehood. Even then, the fact of the matter is, we still have the issue, or the 800-pound gorilla in the room that no one's going to tackle, and that's racism. And just like in the 60s, we had congressmen on the DC committee who would openly and easily disenfranchise the citizens of the city because of the urban nature, the progressive nature, and even the race. How would we address that? Well, we have to address it by calling it what it is. And we have to face it head on and continue on, not necessarily changing demographics, but educating more DC residents and bringing in folks from other parties, so that we're not all too Democrat. How you doing, Mr. Brown?
Good to see you.
Not too Democrat, not too urban, which I'm not against it.
Anise, follow up with the question, Mr. Brown.
You want me to repeat the question?
Yeah, for him to answer, and then we'll give him his 3-minute opening. And
you want to give? Okay.
so
all right.
First the question, and then we'll give his 3-minute.
Okay.
Let me go over the rules real quick, though. First of all, you get a 3-minute opening. The audience can give questions, 30 seconds, must be to the whole panel, not just to any one candidate. Then you'll have a 2-minute closing and 1 minute to reply to the questions. Okay?
All right, Council.
We'll start first with
Mr. Brown.
Yes.
All right, thank
You
you.
can call me Councilman if you want to.
I don't want to do that.
You notice I didn't, right?
I know, it comes up. Okay. I just asked a question, and I got one answer from Mr. Perry Red. Senator Edward Kennedy introduced the first statehood bill along with Ron Dellums in the House. And he's famous, Senator Kennedy is famous for the 4 twos, which I'm sure you're familiar with. He said the problem with getting statehood for DC was it is too black, too urban, too progressive, and too Democrat. And I'd like you to comment on whether you think that is still current, one of the current problems for national support, and if so, how would you address those issues?
First of all, thank you very much for having me. I apologize for being late. I was at the Mayor's Education Summit in Turkey Thicket related to the education budget, so I apologize for being late. First of all, exactly what Senator Kennedy is accurate, and might I add, at that time my father was the Chief Counsel for the Senate Judiciary Committee. That sounds like something my father wrote for Senator Kennedy. But that's accurate. That is exactly what is going on. I think we shouldn't be afraid to talk about those particular issues related to race and politics. It's going to be when Senator Brown and I, my namesake, and I were traveling around, as everyone knows, as we travel around the country talking to other state legislators. It doesn't matter how persuasive our argument is about why the district should be a state. The question is, why would any Republican vote in favor of making D.C. a state when you're probably going to get 2 left-leaning senators and a left-leaning governor in the District of Columbia? So it's an extremely hard sell. People can hide behind the politics of it, the economics of it, but race also has a role. So the 222s is a perfect definition or description.
Now we'll give you your 3-minute opening.
I'll defer on that. I think we'll just stay into the flow of what you guys are doing.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, I think as I talked about before, I think I think our biggest hurdle is our local legislators who want to, in Maryland and Virginia, somewhat, who want to keep our tax dollars flowing to Richmond and Annapolis. Now, I learned, I didn't know this actually before tonight, that one of the co-sponsors of Eleanor's bill is Jerry Connolly from Fairfax, and I find that that's a very encouraging thing. But I think we have to appeal to the American public as a civil right, that we are being disenfranchised. We don't have a voice in Congress. And then I think as far as a civil right, that there is a great appeal to many Americans that we should have a vote in that statehood.
So I think clearly our cause is just. We should have statehood. I think the 4 twos, fundamentally, I think that it's the last one that we are too Democrat. And as Ms. Brown said, if you're a Republican in another state, why would you be supportive of the idea of the district becoming a state and having 2 potentially left-leaning Democrat senators? And that's an issue. That's an issue I don't want to do anything to change. I think the other 2s actually sort of contribute to the expectation that the city will always be very Democrat. And I want the city to be Democrat. I want the city to be progressive. We're going to have to persuade people, and it may well be that we have to come in with someone else, where a state where there are Republicans comes in with the same kind of representation as a way of breaking the dam and getting it done. But I think it's fundamentally about party, actually.
Well, I'd like to thank everybody for keeping it at a time. This is great. Better than most forums. All right, next question I have here is DCPS is paying for charter schools to advertise to let them know that the enrollment is May 15th on local radio stations. How do you feel about that in that manner? A yes or no, or and so on? Right? We'll start with Michael.
Well, clearly, the way the law is written related to charter schools, they're allowed to do things like that. If you want to change the law, I guess that's something we should look into. But that was the whole purpose of the autonomy for charter schools, is to be able to do things just like that.
Okay. Barry?
Sure. I'm against it. Whether it's the law or not is immaterial to the principle that DC traditional schools don't do that. And I don't know if there's money afforded to that. Ms. Brown was the council person. I imagine it was fine to put money forward for traditional schools to do it. But, I am for the infusion of funds and the strong support and investment in our traditional schools. And the same tools and tactics that are used for the charters that are in place now should be used for the traditional schools.
I see two issues with it. It is the case that the charters get a certain amount of funding and they use it in the way that they choose to use it because of the autonomy that they have. But we need to figure out how these two systems fit together, and we need a strategy for how the two systems fit together. We don't have that strategy. We're drifting out, and we're drifting in a way that I believe is very dangerous for the city. So, one, we need to have a strategy. Two, when you get a strategy and you know how big you want the charter sector to be, well, then the best of the charters should go out and advertise and try to attract students. But DCPS has to be doing exactly the same thing, and DCPS has to be given the tools to make their schools as attractive as any charter. We need to be sure that we've invested in every community in the city so there's a local matter of right school that people can go out and advertise for and families will want to be in.
So I think that, parents have sought alternatives, and the response of DCPS is to be competitive with those charter schools, and if there's an issue of them, there's a funding reason why they're not competitive, I want to know about it. I do think that charters have the ability to spend their money. That is what a charter is. They're autonomous from the public system and have the ability to do things to attract families. But as somebody who grew up very close by in a big urban public school system, I went out of boundary to my school, and I can tell you that there are disadvantages to it. I didn't know my classmates. I wasn't able to spend time with them after school. So I do support having, a neighborhood, a strong, highly performing neighborhood, traditional public school. But I do think that we can give parents options as well.
Michael?
Do I need to ask everybody the same question?
Yeah, it has to go to everybody. You can't be pinpointing anybody because I want to be fair to everybody.
Well, first let me...
You don't want to, I'll give you my question.
Let me welcome the taller Michael Brown, as we like to call him. Yeah, since we're on education, let's stay on education for a moment. David Catania recently has proposed legislation to get harsher with chronic truants. At Anacostia High School, for example, you've got 64% chronic truancy, which means that you've got people, at least 64% of the kids that go to Anacostia have more than 10 unexcused absences a year. So he wants to get tough on truants and increase penalties for truancy, going as far as locking truants' parents up if necessary. He also wants the ability to hold back second graders and to hold back kids multiple times if necessary, which you can't do now under current regulations. How do you feel about that as a way to combat? You think he's on the right path of getting tough with kids to combat this problem, or would you take a different approach? Let's start with Councilman Brown, since he just come from the education forum.
The truancy issue is clearly a problem that not just the district has, but a lot of urban jurisdictions. The issue here with habitual truant young folks, one of the things I've talked about is when the white van goes to pick them up, they either take them to the precinct or they take them back to school. If you're habitual truant, then clearly you don't want to be in school. School is not working for you. So instead of taking you back to school or to the precinct, why don't we take them to a job training program and give folks some other options to be successful? On the issue related to being harsher, I mean, arresting parents, I think, is a bit much. The other problem I have with the arresting parents, I think most of the parents would be parents of color that would be arrested, which also is a problem. So I think it's a little too aggressive, but I think we have to figure out also how to make it easier for parents to be involved with everything, from taking kids to the doctor, going to parent-teacher conferences, so parents aren't penalized in their offices by their employers by taking work off to be with their children. So I think there are a lot of things we can do relative to truancy kids, but
Time.
locking parents up is not one of them.
All right.
Sure.
Sure. I testified before Catania's committee on the truancy issue because I have a real life experience with that in another jurisdiction, but the law and the consequence was the same. And to give a child an adult choice is not a good idea. You go to school, your parent gets locked up. I stood against it when I testified before Catania, and we had an exchange over that just last month. I'm for supportive services because there are other issues going on when a child is chronically truant. The prison, the schools to prison pipeline cannot be facilitated anymore. We see what that's led to in this society. And then the racial component is again the 800-pound gorilla in the room. So I'm totally against it, and I've come up with solutions which I've introduced on record to the council.
When you have truancy at that kind of level, there's a lot of failure involved. And the idea that all of the failure is inside of the family, and it's not that an element of the failure is not that the school system itself isn't serving these kids, and it hasn't recognized that these kids have needs that need to be addressed and made an effort to address them or devoted the resources to address them. It's just not right. The idea that if you throw a parent in jail that it's going to make the situation better, it sort of sounds tough. It sounds like, okay, that's going to change society. It's not going to change society. So we need to belly up to the bar and recognize that there are lots of places where the needs of the kids are great. And we need to meet those needs of the kids, whether or not those needs have been met at home. We have to recognize that reality. On the second graders, it's the same thing. We need to provide those kids the services in those early years so they can succeed. And if they're not succeeding, promoting them and putting them in a deeper and deeper hole doesn't help them. So my answer is different for the two questions.
So for most of the 10th grade at Western High School in Baltimore, I sat next to someone who would be considered truant, Marie Brown. And she was very bright. But she didn't have parents, actually. She lived with her aunt sometimes. And I think part of the reason why she didn't show up to school is she was moving around a lot. So that's all to say that I agree with Councilmember Catania's sense of urgency. And just to preview or give a sneak preview, I mean, Marie is a success story here in that she got a PhD from Johns Hopkins. And it's because we had a great teacher, Mrs. Sims, who understood what was going on in that household and what the problem was. And I just think, number one, sometimes our parents aren't involved, and we need, I agree with everyone else, we need to really assess what is the problem in that household. Why is that child not coming, and then put the resources to make sure they are coming. Because I think sometimes they do want to come to school, and there are other barriers to coming to school.
Can I just say one thing? First of all, thanks for that answer because you all are right. I was a chronic truant who dropped out of high school when my school got tough with me. I never went back. Fortunately, I got a master's degree at some point along the way, but underperforming students are victims of a bad school system. They're not the cause of it. So thanks. I'm glad that all of you realize that.
Okay, I'm going to get back to statehood. Charles Cassell, who was the chair of the DC Statehood Commission, really wanted to come tonight. He's not in the best of health, and he was trying to get a ride, but he couldn't come. But he asked me to ask a question on his behalf. He is really insistent that we do something in DC to get the president involved in the statehood issue. And it was national, international news when the president put the license plate, no taxation, on his limo and said he would keep it on the presidential limo fleet. What would you do specifically to raise the issue of statehood to the level that President Obama would get actively involved in. And Charles Cassell wants to know, so think about it. Oh, I'm sorry, Elissa. And
I always get the tough questions. You know, I do think the license plate was a good idea. I mean, I think it comes down to education, and I'm not sure. I think there needs to be some event in which the president, you know, hears from district residents about how they feel, how disenfranchised they feel. And that we can, you know, and here's what's crazy to me about our disenfranchisement is we have some of the most powerful people in the world that live in our city, and powerful people in the press, and they are all disenfranchised too. Like I can, you know, I used to work for a city paper, and one of my colleagues was Jake Tapper, who's now on ABC, and when his street doesn't get plowed, he gets really upset about it. But he doesn't seem to get as upset about having a lack of a vote in Congress, which I've said to him before. So I think that would, you know, some type of event to really drive it home to the president.
I don't think that I have a foolproof suggestion on this, but a couple of kinds of things. We could have an event that is actually sanctioned by the federal government that could be called the New Columbia Summit, and put it on the calendar as a thing that comes up every year. And that's a way that the federal government embraces the idea of the aspiration for statehood. And then once scheduled, it would take a different action to unwind it. So symbols, the license plate was a nice moment, but it happened once. Is there something that we can do that can become routinized? That's one idea. The other is, national Democratic candidates benefit enormously from contributions from people in the District of Columbia. And there has to be a way to marshal that leverage to send a message to national Democratic politicians, including the president, that this is something that matters to us and we matter to them, and so he needs to stand up for what we believe in. It's not the prettiest side of politics, but it's the side of politics.
Well, since we're talking symbolism, figured we could occupy the East Lawn. You know, right around Easter egg roll time. Paint all the eggs red and white. I don't believe in symbolic gestures, but factually speaking, you know, the president has this thing on his website where you log onto the website and put your issue up for petition, and if you reach critical mass, then the president's obligated to talk about it. And I believe that we need to use that tool, a bully pulpit for the people. I'm a people's candidate, and I'd like to find people's solutions to the issue. It appears we can't trust the leaders to lead on it, so we have to make them do it. And that's one tool I would use, and I'd occupy too.
Thank you, Anise, for the question. And Charles, you know, elected officials make decisions related to pressure when it comes to politics. And President Obama clearly felt some pressure. I'm fortunate enough that I see the president and or the first lady maybe 2 or 3 times a year. I don't talk, when I see the president, I don't talk about sports. I talk about statehood. Every time I see him, you only get a couple seconds. And my couple seconds isn't going to be what you watched last time. My couple seconds are, you need to put the license tag on your car, Mr. President. I say it more politely than that. And statehood. Please talk about statehood and the State of the Union. And so pressure, I think we have to continue that pressure. But until we get regular citizens involved with this statehood fight, because we have, when I was hosting hearings, because I was chair of the Statehood Committee, as you guys know, when we have rallies around the city, it's the same very dedicated people that come. Until we get kind of average Joe citizens involved in why statehood is important. So the education part has to go to our fellow citizens so they understand how important statehood is and self-determination.
All right, I'm going to move on also to autonomy and other things in the section. There'll be another 3 questions from the panel each, and then we can move to the audience with their questions if they have any for our candidates on the panel here. My next question has to do with the District of Columbia selling our property under market value. What can you do on the city council to make sure that doesn't happen? Perfect example is on M Street and 24th, the library and the fire station that's going to be developed at and given to the bank at zero profit, or really under market value more or less. And then on top of it, for them to do any type of affordable housing, the district, when they said they were going to do it, now is saying that they got to come up with $7 million for them to do that, and they're going to build them over top of the fire station. So my question is, if you are elected to the council, what can you do to intervene to make sure that they don't sell our properties under market value to begin with, and to make sure that we can gain something from this? Again, these are key properties we're giving away. So my question is, if you're elected, what can you do to keep this from happening or prevent this from happening? And like I said, 1 minute each. We'll start with.
I think it's me. I'm volunteering, even though
Okay.
I'm not sure I have the greatest answer, but I'm volunteering anyways. I think this is an oversight issue. I think whenever there is disposition of public properties, that the relevant committees on the council need to look at what's happened. They need to ask the hard questions about it. They need to test whether or not the sales have been in market value. They need to test whether or not the sales include components that promote key goals for the city, like affordable housing. It may be that there could be legislation on the subject, but I think fundamentally each one of these things comes up in their own distinct animal. And so the role of the council on this is oversight and exerting pressure to make sure that we're not giving anything away and that we are promoting the goals that we think are most important.
I've sat in on a couple of the West End meetings, and I think it's criminal that we are allowing our public assets to be given away, basically, to developers who don't have our best interests as the citizens of DC at heart. Part of our platform is entitled Pride in Our Public Assets. And so I would legislate the inability for our properties to be sold below market value. And we work very hard to show our city council as well as our citizens the importance of keeping our public assets as part of our children's legacy.
Well, I think Matthew may have mentioned it relative to oversight. Well, that's exactly what I did, was to make sure that properties were not sold for $1. Now, 15, 20 years ago, when cities were starting to redevelop, gentrification was just in its infancy, you had to do that because you had to entice developers to come in to get these properties so they would develop them and go to the bank and get the financing. But today, we don't have to do that. We don't have to sell them at $1 year, weeks, or whatever the particular terms are. So that's exactly what I did. I kept that from happening, and these are consequences of politics and elections. Obviously, I was not successful in November, and now these things are occurring because I was not letting them occur. Victor Hoskins and I agree on a lot of things. This is one of the things we did not agree on. But now these things are occurring, and frankly, on the affordable housing side, but when I was structuring some of these deals, it wasn't we were asking a favor from the developers. You have to do affordable housing if you want to do this deal. And that's kind of how we set the trend, and that's the kind of oversight that we were fortunate enough to do.
So I think the first question that needs to be asked is, should we be selling this public asset? Should we be selling this building? And, I agree that the main role I see of the council is performing oversight. And there are 2 steps to this, process, which is, first, the council, there are 2 committees, I believe, that are involved with the disposition of any property. First, you have to decide, should it be disposed of at all, and then there's actually disposing of it and selling it. And I think in the West End question, there's a question of should we have sold it, number 1. And then, if I'm remembering correctly, I think the developer promised something that then they have now come back and said, well, actually, we're not going to do that. And that's where I think we need to look at things. First of all, we need to ask lots of questions, why not? One thing that I pushed with Councilmember Brown's help actually was the Abatements and Exemptions Act, which basically said to developers, if you want something from the city, you have to tell us why you need it.
Well, in Ward 8, we saved Malcolm X, but now I hear it's being taken again away from us because they want to put a shopping center there.
Yes.
Again, our properties that our grandparents and their parents and other residents' parents have paid for through taxes by buying stuff in the stores, whatever, are being given away. What I'm saying is, how do we stop them from doing it? I mean, DC, I feel, is a city that if they want to be here, they need to pay 10 times more than what's worth at today's market value, because it is that type of city. So how do you stop it? Is my real thing. How do you stop them from taking these properties that are big properties and giving them away like that? How do you stop it? I should have said maybe. So, well, I'll give everybody 30 seconds to say, well, how do we stop this type of scenario from happening? If that's okay, 30 seconds, good for them to just, because I want to know, how do we stop it? Because again, they're key pieces of property. So, do you have an idea of how you would stop it other than oversight? I mean,
I think I'm the one started, right?
I think I was the one who started.
Yeah, you started.
Okay.
But, I mean, I'm not sure I always want to stop it, honestly. In the place that, in my ANC, there was a proposal to build on top of the library. And it was a very controversial proposal, and it required the sale of air rights over the library. And the library sat on top of a metro stop. And in my view, it made sense to build on top of a metro stop and create more density. So I'm not so sure that in every single case I'd want to stop it. I would want to feel like every transaction was fair and the city got what it wanted and needed from the transaction.
Article 1 of the Constitution says the legislative branch has the responsibility to legislate and also raise money. The way to stop it is to legislate. And I am not for the giveaways of our public assets. And for anyone who might be with the press, make sure you write that down. This started before Mr. Brown lost his last race. The councilman facilitated this happening along the way, so this is not something new.
Time.
I'm not sure what you're referring to. That's not accurate. The reason I don't get a lot of money from developers is because I prevented that from happening. So I think we like to say these kind of big things relative to the council, but that's not accurate related to me.
All right, answer the question.
I am, but when my name is mentioned, I'm going to say something back. The second piece is related to development and taking these properties. It's a political will question. You can do all the legislating you want. If it's not enforced and there isn't the political will to enforce it, it's going to continue to happen. So it's not necessarily a stoppage issue relative to legislation. It's a political will that you want a certain kind of city. With 1,100 new residents coming in our city every single month, folks are not scared to live in any community in this city, and they're taking up affordable housing units, which is putting pressure on people that actually need the affordable housing units.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Happy to answer. I think it requires having, as I said, a strategic vision that requires working with the Office of Planning, working with neighbors who I think are often feel like they're not part of the discussion about what the vision is for their own communities. I think working with the developer, we've all gone to these meetings with various groups, and everyone claims that they're the last people to be spoken to when a piece of legislation is before the council, and I would definitely change that. That's part of who I am as an information gatherer, as a reporter. Yeah.
Okay.
Are you going to ask another statehood question? If you're going to ask another statehood question, I'll ask a non-statehood question.
I'm not sure. Go ahead and
All right.
ask what you want.
As part of the new school budget, there's going to be a librarian in every school, but they're going to be half-time in 63 schools. Don't you think it's crazy in a city with 40% functional illiteracy to be cutting librarians out of our public school system, especially with the way the internet is growing and is affecting education. And the question really is, would you fight to put full-time librarians in every school? You want to start?
Sure. You know, as far as librarians go, you know, we have libraries all over the city that are open part-time. And so I believe in a city where we're the fourth most expensive city living in the country. We have second highest paid city council in the country. We just enjoyed a $417 million surplus. That's something we should be investing in. Libraries, not only in the schools, and for 63 schools, that means most of them are going to fall in areas that have low literacy rates, areas, Ward 7 and 8 in particular, areas where the schools are children of color. So I'm definitely for the funding there, but I'm for funding librarians all over the city, so libraries are open much longer during the day.
I actually went much further during that discussion. Clearly, we need librarians full-time, but they also have to have health professionals. You need to have a nurse in the school. You need to have an arts teacher. You need to have a full-time physical PE teacher. I went to Shepherd, had all those resources. My kids went to Lafayette, had all those resources. And we have gotten away from that, in particular in schools in the eastern part of the city that don't have it. And so a level playing field, but I think we need to have more than just a librarian. We need to have the other resources for young folks as well.
So I have a lot of friends who've gone to library science school, and they're just not sitting like caretaking for books. You know, I think what a librarian is somebody who can help you get access to information in an information-driven society, especially in DC. You know, I look at this from a workforce perspective, which is we have highly skilled jobs that deal with a lot of information. And so I think we need to see our librarians as, you know, information resource folks. But I do have, so I would fund librarians in all schools, and I think I would expand them. I think librarians stereotypes them too much. I think we need to think of them as information specialists. And then, you know, I just went into my wallet. I have my DC library card. You know, I see libraries, I use the Southeast, I used to live near the Southeast Library, now I live near the Northeast Library, and it is packed all the time, especially the computers. And I use, you know, I don't read, well, you don't read at all now. I don't know about these guys, but I can barely read the Post in the morning, which really bothers me. But it's a civic asset.
Here's what's hard about this election, we all agree on all of this. Councilmember Brown's point about wraparound services is fundamental, and the need for wraparound services, in particular in places where the children have the greatest needs, is the most acute, and that's where librarians are often cut, because they're cut in places where enrollment is down. They're a related set of issues. We have to solve those issues. It is more than librarians. Librarians are more than just librarians. The infrastructure investments in our schools and in our libraries, we need to take advantage of them much more than we do. The libraries should be, the time for the libraries to be open was cut when budgets were tight. We're not there now. We should have the libraries open for longer so they're used in the kinds of ways that Elissa is talking about. And we need to leverage those assets in all different kinds of ways, and I think we all agree on that. The only thing I'd add is, can I turn the questions to Mr. Brown? What's your wife do?
This question was put in there for Mrs. Brown, who's the head of all public school libraries. And Elissa, if you ever meet her, don't ever say I called them librarians. They're librarian information specialists.
Right.
Yeah. But yes, that question was from Mrs. Brown.
So we'll make sure she's
Politically correct, yeah.
I'm sure I'd like your wife a lot.
She's a librarian.
You just did it
Yeah,
again.
you can tell her.
So that's her personality. It's right. It's not a bad word. It's an old guy word. Your turn.
Okay, this is actually this is kind of related to statehood, but that's what it's called, a statehood forum. I think the people who actually serve DC initially love DC. They love the city. They love the people here. They love representing the people. There's a lot of reform talk now, and there's a lot of disparaging the council, but you've got to do this with love. You've got to want this position because you love the city, you love the people. Just go through this, go through it. Tell me, what do you love about DC? Why do you want to represent the citizens here? And what do you like about being here in the city? Michael Brown.
As a third generation Washingtonian, is this something special about your hometown? I went to undergrad in Boston, and one of my concerns is that I think there seems to be a plan for our city to look like San Francisco or Boston, and I don't want that to happen. I want us to be DC. I think our ethnic and economic diversity is a strength, and we seem to be getting away from that a little bit. So what I like about DC is everything it has to offer, everything from the different quadrants of the city, the different kinds of foods that are here, the different kinds of people, all the different languages that are spoken, and a hometown feel that we may be losing a little bit relative to kind of what's going on demographically. So I don't want to put walls up around our city. I think it's great that new residents are coming in, come one, come all, but let's not kick out the residents that have been here a long time to make room for the new folks. We can have both. We can have economic diversity, ethnic diversity, but a lot of that all comes back to affordable housing. If you don't have real affordable housing, you can't keep your teachers here, your seniors, firefighters, police officers. So I want DC to be DC the way I know it and remember.
So I grew up in Baltimore, and so a lot of Washingtonians might consider me country or something like that. But my dad is a federal worker, and he has commuted from Baltimore to DC on the MARC train for 33 years. And why do we live in Baltimore? Well, because the house that my parents loved in Baltimore, they couldn't afford to live in Washington, actually. But I think, I have a love affair with urban politics. I'll just be honest. And I could have landed in Chicago. I could have stayed in Baltimore, but I landed here. And the reason I love it is because I have a network of friends and family. My brother lives here in Chevy Chase, DC. My dad still commutes every day. That just are very special, and I'm sure this is echoed by the other people here. I've seen this network now that I'm running for office. All these people, the support network I have here has come to support me in this race, and it's just really, it's humbling, actually.
Part of my activism comes through working with Wilson High School, which is 50% African American, 25% European American, 17% Hispanic, 8% Asian. It's almost a perfect microcosm of the city as it is today. We were working on the Wilson modernization. It was a beautiful fall afternoon, and I came and I stood on a patio in the back watching the football field. And the football team was out there, and the girls lacrosse team was out there, and there were these boys doing cross country. Every kind of kid from the city and in the world was out there on that field, and it hit me. God, I love this place. I mean, I just think the cultural richness and diversity of this city is so special. All of the different communities are so wonderful, and I want to be a part of preserving and strengthening those. And so that's why I love this.
10 seconds left.
Love it even more.
Well, I'm running for this seat because I love this city. I have a passion for it. I was born in Southwest, reared in Southeast, raised in Northeast, and live in Northwest. And I've had the opportunity to touch and be a part of every quadrant of the city. The fact of the matter is, its density, its city feel is unlike anywhere else I've been. Whether I was in Chicago or Atlanta, nothing compares to DC, although many try. The cultural richness of this city is just something unmatched. We have Smithsonian's downtown. You can travel anywhere in the city in 20 minutes. Well, maybe not down North Capitol, but we do have problems and issues that need to be addressed. We're a segregated city, and we have to be honest about that. And as it gentrifies, the term livable, walkable city means that people are cordoned off in their little part of the city, and then not to be, not to go over there. I don't like that. And so that's problematic. And then the disrespect for some of the citizens of this city. And I'm running so that we can make sure we address that and make the city the better place. Do it different and get it right.
All right. My next question has to do with the District of Columbia. No, we're going to start, like I said, we got 2 more questions each here, and then we're going to go to audience, and that'll be the last segment. All right. It'll be quick. We're almost done with our part. Because I wrote 5 questions, and I have 6, but I'm going to do 5.
Sounds like somebody's ready.
All right. The District of Columbia basically gives grants to businesses to move here. Now, 2 examples. Living Social got $100 million, and they're in bankruptcy.
30, it was 33 million about.
Read 100, but all right, 33 million. And we gave Yes Organic here in Ward 7, 90 million to open a grocery store, which closed, and now has a regular grocery store, which is still in place. What are we going to do to stop giving money to businesses that come here, take our money, and then close? The fact of the matter is, we're paying for businesses to come here, and they're not attached to the city if they close in 2 years. What do we do to stop this, and what do we vet to make sure that these businesses are going to be viable businesses that will stay in our community instead of spending our money and leaving once they get the grant, because they're not obligated to pay it back, plus the tax incentives and so on and so on. So what can we do, or what can you do on the city council to correct this?
Okay, obviously the council's role in oversight and asking the questions. As I mentioned before, one of the things I worked on that with Councilmember Brown was this Exemptions and Abatements Information Act, which is when a developer comes or when a business comes and says we need a certain subsidy from the city, that the CFO documents exactly what the financial gap is and why we need it. And the business community is interested in this thing called like so every bill has what's called a fiscal impact statement. What is the impact? It's financial impact. And some businesses have asked for a economic benefit impact, which actually I think is not a bad idea if it talks about, well, how many jobs are going to be created, what types of wages will those jobs have. I'd like to see that done. Just on Living Social, I actually don't think that was a bad way to structure it. It's structured 4 years out so we can see if Living Social is viable before we give them anything. I think Living Social should have given us a little bit more in terms of training, but I don't think it was a terrible approach.
I think oversight again. There may be cases where it makes sense, where you're really trying to attract an industry or you're trying to create a new sector, and I can see where it makes sense, but you have to scrutinize whether or not the specific deal makes sense and make sure that it does. And I do agree that there's the fiscal impact and then there's the economic benefit, and you can use things like that to extract further benefits from the business over the long term. When you're in a situation like that, you should build in clawbacks. If a business doesn't adhere to what it was supposed to do, you should claw back any benefits that were given. And also, I think we're getting to a place where we ought to be doing this less and less, because our economy is getting stronger and stronger, and our competitive position in the region is getting stronger and stronger. We shouldn't have to do it, but we may have cases where it does make sense.
Sure. I was on the Mayor's Office and Grants and Partnership website today, and there are tools in the toolbox to make sure that these businesses have viable working plans as they go forward. I'm a big fan of quarterly reporting. It might seem like micromanagement, but part of the council's role is oversight. And when it comes to spending our money responsibly, we have to have a tool in place. I've offered an open source solution to doing that so that the citizens of the city can see, and so that the legislators can see exactly where our money's going, how it's being spent, and if it's being responsibly put forward for the citizens of the city. It's so important that our executive branch and our legislative branch work together on the oversight, and then the reporting is highly important. That's what I would do, Bill.
On your question related to living social, a couple of the points in your question were a little not quite accurate. I actually co-wrote the living social law, and I actually did put a clawback in it to make sure that if living social didn't reach several different fronts, how many job hires relative to DC residents, their economics, if they didn't reach those, the clawback would happen. But the district has not and probably will not now write a check. That's not how a tax abatement or exemption works. But we do, in some cases, do need to attract or keep businesses here. They had, at one point when we were doing the bill, had just about 2,000 employees that were going to move to Reston, Virginia. I thought it was important enough for us to keep them here, and we did. But that does not mean they're going to get the benefit of it if they don't achieve certain milestones. And it looks like they probably will not, relative to their economics.
I'm going to make this quick, and I'm going to make this my last question so that we can get some audience questions in. But Perry mentioned the 51st State Commission, which has been something that's been out in the wind for a very long time. The position, I think, of our congressional delegation is that the congressional delegation should run the statehood movement inside the Wilson building. Do you think there should be a 51st State Commission? And if so, why? Let's start with Michael Brown.
Yes, as you know, I had a hearing on that when I chaired the relevant committee. I think it's important that we have every tool in our arsenal related to getting self-determination and statehood and budget autonomy, and you name whatever else we need to have. Statehood, to me, is the ultimate prize. So the answer is yes, but then obviously you got to put money where your mouth is. As you know, Senator Brown and I've talked for quite some time that we don't put enough money into the statehood efforts here. That includes our shadow representatives. It includes the commissions and the like. I remember fighting, I think, for $75,000 for statehood efforts, got it, and that was unbelievable that we got $75,000. We need several million to have a real approach, a real aggressive, unapologetic approach to trying to get statehood for the residents of the District of Columbia. So the answer is yes, I do think we need to have our DC Commission, Statehood Commission back up and running.
Correct.
Oh, I definitely support it. There needs to be an active office in the Wilson building. And like Councilman Brown mentioned, the fact of the matter is, it's just not an investment we've made in the city, and we're paying the cost every year as time goes by. I believe that we should concentrate our efforts in the Puerto Rico solution. Same way Hawaii and Alaska came to the Union in 1959, we need to follow that same solution for statehood. Just like we were looking at the Utah solution on voting rights, we should aggressively attack, and it's going to take more money. It's going to take full funding, and I'd be a council person who would definitely champion that funding.
I think that there are more tools that we can use to try to achieve statehood, and the Statehood Commission makes sense. The exact organization of it, honestly, I have not been as involved in this movement. I've been doing different things. I've been doing democracy work around the world, but I have not worked on it here. I think in the same sort of way. I would actually want to hear from the people in the movement that is trying to achieve statehood about what they thought was the best way to organize. And if those people, which I think, this autonomy referendum, I'm very impressed by what people are doing on that. If those people said the right place in it, and maybe they are already saying this very clearly, the right place is the Statehood Commission at the Wilson building, and that's the way that you organize it, then I would want to support that. But I'd want to hear more than I have, and that's my fault, from the people who've been leading the effort on this and doing some positive things.
So I think it sends a message about what we think of the shadow delegation, that they're at 1 Judiciary Square and not at the Wilson building.
We are at the Wilson.
Yeah.
building.
Oh, I thought you guys were still at 1 Judiciary Square. Okay, well that's probably.
They're in the basement.
Oh, good.
But they're
Oh,
there.
okay, good. Well, Okay, first thing achieved, Monty.
Look at your answer.
Right,
Chalk it up
at
as
least
an
you're
accomplishment.
making progress. I mean, I think there, as I said, I think at the top, I think if we're going to have fight for statehood, we have to have we have to set a budget, which we think is our win budget, and we have to fund it. And the only thing I would ask of the commission is to have a clear strategy, which at times I think a resident like myself is sort of unclear. What is our strategy to achieve statehood? I think when we fund things, we need to have a strategic vision and strategy for how we're spending those dollars.
Okay. Please, do you have a question? Or?
I defer to the audience.
Well, I have one yes or no, and then we go to the audience.
Well, let the audience.
Yes or no? One, so yes or no? I'd like to know, first of all, with our charter schools, I think the charter schools should have to pay an administrative fee to DCPS. Are you for or against it? Based on the fact that we do a lot of work and they're getting free work out of our school system. Are you for charging charter schools administrative fees for all the things we do? Yes or no? And then we go to the audience. Because I like making government profitable, so it doesn't cost us.
Okay.
So, yes or no?
I guess I'm unclear what.
All right, we pay for advertising for charter schools, and we have all these things that we regulate for them. Shouldn't they pay a fee for all these things? Yes or no? Yes or no?
No, and that I think that we should
okay.
have equity in
Next,
funding.
no, next. Yes or no?
I think the issue is that we need to figure out how to do.
Yes or no? No, either yes or no.
On that specific question, I'm afraid then the answer is no, that's not the
Well, then we give them next.
My answer is yes.
Next.
Not enough information.
All right, audience, go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to ask a question I think Johnny Bonds would have asked if he were here. And that is, I have a two-part question, I'll be brief.
30 seconds in.
Yes, his question would be, have you spoken out against the closure of the 15 neighborhood public schools? And if not, why not? My second part is actually quite an issue that the Michael Brown, who does not ride a motorcycle, brought up before, and that is, why aren't there more folks more actively involved in the statehood movement? So the second part question is, has the economic policies of our elected local government helped to contribute to this disempowerment of our residents? Thank you.
So I'll go.
Questions.
Okay, I will go first. I have spoken out many times about the issues in our schools and about the need to strengthen the local school system. On the specific closures and consolidations, I think that a number of them don't make sense, but the biggest picture is we need to get this right, and we need to make a top priority having great local schools in every neighborhood. So I've spoken out on that subject many times. On the statehood issue, whether it's the economic policies, I think that sometimes we have to take responsibility ourselves. When, as Councilmember Brown said, go to a lot of meetings and the same people come. And the hats off to those people, but we need to somehow get more people seized of the importance of this issue. And I don't think it's economic. I don't think it's an economic policy that creates the apathy. I think it's something else.
Yeah, I've spoken out. I've spoken out on the We Act Radio's program, their education town hall. I've spoken out when we first introduced our platform on December 17th on our website at www.red4council.com. We are unequivocally against the school closures. We're unequivocally against the expansion of further charters. We've spoken out in terms of that, and we've also organized with some of the groups who are against it and the parents. Why haven't more people participated in statehood? I think that was your question. Part of that is, and it's a multifold question, but when you're talking about a working class population who's heavily affected by this, who are not doing well, they're generally consumed by their lives. It's the same way in community organizing, and that's what I do for a living. The media is partly responsible, and when the media doesn't say it, people don't know.
I have absolutely spoken out relative to the school closures, and actually went a little further and talked a little bit about, keep in mind, Chancellor Henderson, these were recommendations that were made. And I have said, I think now that the recommendations have been made, why don't we slow down the process? Because it seems to me that people of color seem to be more impacted by the closures than others. And if that's the case, that means the playing field is not level relative to the school closures. So I've called out to say that we need to slow the process down and have some more community input and a better plan of what's going to happen to folks, in particular, the eastern side of the city, and where they're going to have to leave their communities now to go to other schools, which disrupts everything. How early the parents have to get up now, whether they're going to feed their kids breakfast. There are a whole lot of ripple effects when you take kids out of their own neighborhood and send them to another school. So I've not just spoken out about it, I've asked for the process to be slowed down.
So before I made this crazy decision, which gets crazier every day, part of my role at DC Fiscal Policy Institute, and not only was to do workforce development stuff, but to help with strategic communications. And the first thing that struck me about the Chancellor's plan was that it was supposed to be cost saving, but that there was no money attached. Later, and then I left, and DC FBI pursued that point. I think my role on the council, I'm not running to be school's chancellor, I'll say that, but I'm running to ask the questions, which, how are closing these schools going to lead to better outcomes for our kids? But I'll say, and I know this might be unpopular, half our kids are now in charters. And so, as a budget person, I am, it's not like I was in school where you had a predictability in budgeting because kids moved their, from elementary to middle school is all very predictable. Now at charters, it's very unpredictable, which makes budgeting very, very difficult.
Did I answer that question?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So any other questions from the audience? Okay. Thanks.
Real quick question. We have a bag tax here in this city.
No, right.
And now there's this proposal to have a bottle tax. What are your thoughts? Do you support, do you or do you not support a bottle tax?
30 seconds.
Yeah, what's first,
I don't support a bottle tax. Our city's nickel and diming us to death. Okay, from the parking fines to speed cameras, and we enjoy surplus, got a healthy economy. I just find it highly unnecessary. And I remember when I was a kid up here at Elmira, we would put bottles in my wagon, and take them and redeem the bottles. My mother used to like RC, and so I'd get a nickel for every bottle. So, we could come up with solutions that don't burden the people. I'm a people's candidate, and I'm just so outdone, of the way the city is just nickel and diming us from every time I have to register my car, the parking sticker, you name it. And so I think it's burdensome on the people who use or spend more of their income on the necessities of life.
No, not supported.
So I'm supportive of the bag bill. I think it's been successful, and we sometimes use tax policy to change people's behaviors. And I can tell you that when I go to Virginia, because I do, it's striking. So I'll say it's striking that people still use plastic bags. And so I do support. I haven't seen the bill itself, but I do support a bottle bill. I feel guilty right now because I know this bottle is gonna. I used to live in Southeast, near, very close to the Anacostia River, and I see these bottles in the river all the time. And I think the bag bill has been successful, and I think the arguments against it was that it's going to discriminate against the poor, and I don't think that's been true. There was a very successful effort to give people reusable bags, and I don't see any kind of economic or class stratification with the bag bill. I think everyone realizes it's a good thing to preserve our environment. It's a similar effort with the bottle bill.
All right.
I think the bag taxes actually work. The bag tax is different than what I would do with bottles. The bag tax, I think you can change your behavior and you can use different kinds of bags. I get in trouble when I don't do that in my household. And the only way to do it, I don't see a deposit on a bag, but on bottles you can do it with a deposit. Even these bottles right here, it's a deposit system in different states. And so that goes to, I think, what Perry was talking about doing it in a way that doesn't create a new economic burden. In fact, it cannot, in its own odd way, create an opportunity. Somebody could pick up bottles and clean up, and we fight litter, and it's a way for somebody to get revenue off of somebody else's misconduct. I think a well-crafted bottle bill could help the environment and not impose a burden if it used a deposit system.
James, I'm going to change my answer. I'm persuaded by my colleagues up here. Now I want to say further exploration.
You don't get two chances.
Well, I hope he's writing it down. Maybe he is.
I hope that's true.
I said, but that's showing open-mindedness. I was persuaded by that.
There'll be 3 questions. You and the gentleman there, and then the gentleman back, and that'll be four last questions.
On the ballot, there's the budget autonomy resolution, which basically is acknowledging that DC should arrest control of its own budgetary authority from Congress. Puerto Rico and the other territories have citizenship and non-voting delegates, but those people do not have to pay federal income taxes. So in light of that same vein, would you be in favor of DC as a council person to bring this issue of statehood to the absolute forefront, to basically say, if we don't have statehood, then DC residents should not have to file federal income taxes, just like the other territorial citizens don't have to file federal income taxes, and fight and be willing to fight for that?
Yes or no, or reply?
Yeah. Would you be in favor of that?
Yes or no? Yes or no?
Yeah, I sort of like the principle, but I don't think it's practical. So I think that I want to fight for statehood in lots of different ways, but the idea of a tax boycott and come what may, my instinct is that's not going to get us to where we want to go.
I'd be willing to introduce that legislation. I said before that I would do some landmark legislation that other council people are afraid to touch with a 10-foot pole. So I realize I only have one term. It's important for us to take extreme measures at this point. We've been disenfranchised since the city was founded. Factually speaking, leave it there. Yes.
In any kind of fight, protest, symbolism is important. I don't know if I would completely support that only related to this Congress, because I think there would be some unintended consequences that this Congress would put on the District of Columbia if we did something like that. Puerto Rico doesn't have to deal with those kind of consequences as we do up on the other side of Pennsylvania Avenue with that far-right Republican majority. So I love the symbolism, but I too don't think it's that practical.
Okay.
I apologize, I have to go. But I think I'm one of those bizarre people that see taxes as a good thing, which is it pays for a lot of things. And my hesitation with withholding all federal taxes is, there are federal taxes that go to important things for our, I'm a we are all in this together kind of person. But I do think we should think of ways. I mean, our real issue is the structural imbalance we have in that we can't, charge folks who live in the suburbs and work in the city any kind of commuter tax. And it creates, and half our property tax base is off the books, basically. So I do think we should think of like some creative ways in which we can, sort of demonstrate our power as local taxpayers, and I think that's part of what their excitement and why I support the referendum. But I do think federal taxes go for all kinds of important things. And I apologize.
And let me just add to that Eleanor Holmes Norton did in fact introduce legislation like that many years ago, and recently a guy named Gomer from Texas, a Republican, did exactly the same thing. But there are no co-sponsors, but he did try to introduce that legislation.
She had her hand up first, and then the gentleman there, and
We'll come back to
then
the
Art.
same issue.
And then-
Okay, well, let me, just before you go, I mean, I have a bunch of questions, but I want to ask this, I guess it's
Can't be
asking a
directed to one
question.
person, gotta be directed to all of them.
Yeah,
It's a
Okay,
sure.
okay.
I mean, yeah, all of them.
All right.
Everybody, but I want this to, the question is, will you commit yourself now
Okay.
to stop the zoning commission from giving exemption to construction, to, developers like East Bank
Okay,
from building housing, workforce housing? Will you commit yourself to pay attention now, tomorrow, and whenever it comes up again?
yes.
Because they're gonna do it again, not just that developer, but others, to go to testify to before the zoning and do whatever you can to stop them from getting those exemptions.
So,
What happens is they, rather than following the inclusionary zoning policy, these developers are getting exemptions, so we don't get workforce housing built
yes.
because they get exemption.
So I have made that commitment time and again in my career. I've spent the past 4 years basically working on these issues. And I have a clear track record of pushing for that, so you have my commitment most definitely. And I do apologize. This compressed schedule means I actually have something at 9 o'clock I have to get to. But let me, so I have a clear track record of working on these issues and pushing, as I said before, and I agree with you, that when we're giving something to developers, they should give something back to the city. Now, it might mean jobs. It might mean training. It might mean a good retail mix. It might mean affordable housing. But when we talk about affordable housing, I think it's very nebulous. And I think we need to talk about, well, who is the affordable housing for? Is it for people of, really,
It's clear in
Okay,
the
time,
zoning commission policies.
Time.
It
We
is
gotta get
clear.
out of here soon,
Okay.
so let's make the
Thank
questions
you.
very brief, and let's do 30-second replies,
All right.
please, and then that way we can close when we get out of here. Because we are after 8:30 now. It's been a good forum, and I understand everybody else's question. Last question, yours, gentlemen?
Oh,
Oh, no, they get the answer.
I mean, I think
30
I
seconds.
think we can do it very, very quickly. Yes, developers should be held to the requirement to meet the obligations that are in the zoning code. And affordable housing is one of those requirements that needs to be done. There should
So
be.
the question is, will you
Yes or no?
speak up
Yes, yes.
tomorrow when it
Next.
happens again?
All right, next.
Yes.
Okay,
Jessica? Okay.
Yeah, my answer is unequivocally yes.
all right,
Not only, I think you said today and tomorrow, but I did it yesterday.
okay.
In my oversight, that's exactly what I did. Again, I have to keep coming back. One of the reasons developers didn't raise a lot of money for me was because of that, the stance I took as chair of that committee. So Leanne, you've already seen me do it. I don't have to promise you anything, I've already done it.
All right.
Next question, sir.
Yes, there have been a number of issues, obviously, we can't ask everything. I would like to ask a couple thousand. But, and it's always good to see an impressive cadre of candidates who profess to support statehood running for office in the district. I'm a former chairman of the DC Statehood Party, and we're always fighting for troops and cadre. But, among the reasons we don't have statehood is because, yes, it's a question,
All right.
and I'll get to it, that, colonies are kept as long as they're profitable. There's no reason to have a colony if it's not profitable. The metropolitan doesn't pay for the colony.
No.
DC is a net profit center for the federal government. For example, Virginia is a net loss to the federal government in terms of taxation alone. DC, on the other hand, pays more to the federal government than we get back from the federal government. So my question is this. One of the reasons people in the city don't support statehood, perhaps, one of the things that we don't always emphasize is, what is the cost of colonial status? And that's the sort of flip side of what is the benefit to our daily lives and quality of life if we were to have statehood, for example, and this is where the question comes in, land's taken off the property rolls. Well, look, let me stop, and I'll just circulate.
No, just say the question
No, I
one
don't,
time,
you know,
just a minute.
I got you, but we'll talk later.
I mean, I agree with everything you say.
Well, let me finish. It's only gonna take 30 seconds. And no one is rushing. Services of the federal government. We provide water, police protection, fire, and we're so wimpus about it, we don't even say how much it costs us. But it's averaging about $250 million bucks. The lack of a reciprocal tax costs us from 1.9 to 2.2 billion dollars a year. You know, we have an $11.1 billion budget now. When you add this up, the fact that, you know, the property taken off our rolls, the lack of reciprocal taxation, services to the federal establishment, the constant robbery of our economic base, we're gonna, even with the help of DC officials, we're gonna let SEC leave the district. Okay, just like we let FBI do so. Okay, that took money and base out of the cities. Well, I'm getting to this. The lack of representation, of course, and a vote in Congress. You know, we want equality with all people who pay federal taxes. You said this is the last question.
Well, it's not, it's another question.
Sure, well, I'm sorry, okay. My point is this. Can we, among the things we can do to emphasize this, will the candidates support the idea of having a special attachment or addendum to the budget of the District of Columbia when it's sent to Congress, include an itemization of the costs of colonial status to the people of the District of Columbia?
All right, yes or no?
I like that idea.
Yes or no?
That means you're supporting.
Yes. Yes or no?
No. No, I wouldn't do that.
Yes or no, that's it.
No, it's not it.
We have to
Well, I
move on.
can't
We have
answer
to get
that
out of here.
question because it's more than.
Yes, but I probably wouldn't call it the colonial status
No, I'm not
itemization.
calling it colonial
No,
status.
All right.
Attached to our
Next
budget
question.
is
Next
what we
question.
pay and don't get
Yes or
back.
no question, please.
And what we lose.
So the
All right.
answer is yes.
My question is, if you're elected on April 23rd, you'll be on the council in time to vote on the fiscal year 14 budget and the fiscal year 13 supplemental. The surpluses for those 2 years add up to $368 million. Do you support the Fair Budget Coalition's proposal to invest at a little over $100 million to make a serious down payment on reducing poverty in the district?
Yes or no?
We're not-
Yes or no?
I support half the money going into the rainy day fund and half the money being used for priorities like the ones that you're talking about.
Yes or no? Next.
No, I support much more than 100 million.
I actually worked with the Fair Budget Coalition on that presentation for the last 2 years. I've done that, and when I float the letter around the Wilson
Yes or
building,
no?
I've already done it. So yes.
Okay. Last question.
I'm glad you got that in.
Last question.
Sir.
Jesse.
Oh. All right, well, I'll ask it. I mean, sort of, just to clarify the whole issue of supporting, well, we phrased it as a tax revolt, but would you, I think the question needs to be asked, does that mean you would also support bills that are being introduced, and I mean, you mentioned Louis Gohmert's bill, a couple of other Republicans, to simply remove us from, in federal taxation, basically permanently?
Yes or no?
Just to make it clear, because that is the existing legislation that's almost always in.
To take us out of the role.
Basically, yeah, to give us the same tax status as essentially other territories.
Yes or no?
I don't think that's the solution.
I mean, I support it. One of the problems is the majority of citizens wouldn't, and they'd be affected by it because we have a recalcitrant and hateful Congress right now.
All right.
Or House of Representatives. So they
And so
punish.
everybody can get a closing.
Thank you for the clarity, but I'm still in no.
All right. Why don't we let them close? I'd like to thank them for coming. They're all winners in my book because again, they're running and they're trying to make that change. And again, anybody who runs for public office is doing it because they really feel that change is needed and they have a reason for doing it. So let's let them close and then thank everybody for coming again. I think it was a very good forum.
1 minute closing.
We'll give you a 1 minute because we got to get out of here. Thank you again. Start, man.
Well, as I said, I think showing up is 95% of life, and we showed up, so I hope that does something. Obviously, I'm committed to serving the city. I would love to win the vote of all the people in this room. I think almost everybody in this room is committed to a candidate already, but still, I'm honest, I'm hardworking, I look for creative solutions, and I get things done, and I would love to get your vote. I'd love to get any of the votes in this room, because that means I probably changed the minds of somebody other than, except my son, who I have to believe is with me.
Well, I'm going to work hard to change his mind. I'm Kerry Red, and I just thank you all for coming. I'm always happy to be in Ward 8, where my life started. It's highly important that we get it right, do something different in the city, and not just for the sake of change, but because it's the right thing to do. We need to understand that there are constitutional principles that we are being denied. And so this forum with Ms. Jenkins and Senator Brown and Mr. Stracuzzi is highly, highly important, and something all of us need to tell 10 people about. So I'm looking forward to running in this race with the Honorable Councilman Brown. I'm just honored, I'm humbled to be as a candidate here in Washington, D.C. I would have never dreamed it, but I want to make the most of it, and I'm fighting earnestly for every single vote in the city. Any voter will come out. So again, Perry Red at www.red4council.com. Doing it different, getting it right.
Michael, I'm going to give you 2 minutes because of the fact that you came late, so this way you get a longer closing.
I don't think I'll use the 2 minutes, but thank you very much. I'd like to thank you guys for hosting this. I want to also acknowledge Wanda Lockridge, a leader in this community. Give her a hand for the wonderful work. And to Senator Brown and to Anise, who have been toiling in the fields for quite some time related to self-determination, statehood. Give them another hand. I would love to see a picture. Anyone has a picture of Anise without that hat on? Please send it to her. She is so committed to this effort. Obviously, I'm going to continue to fight hard for your support and vote on April 23rd. I clearly would love for you to look at my record, which is really second to none related to fighting for the residents here in the District of Columbia at Michael Brown 2013. And so with that, I hope I'm under 2 minutes. Again, thank you very much for having me, and I hope I can get your vote and support. Thank you.
And again, thank you everybody for coming out. And again, I'd like to thank Michael Brown for stepping in for Donnie, and Anise always for all the work she does and always being a part of this. And thanks again, everybody. It was a great evening. I hope this becomes the forum of the year that everybody needs to be at when they got to get elected. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Happy to see you. How are you?
Nice to meet you too. They're all winners of money.
Oh, okay. Is that right? I'm not a Democrat. Right.
So until next time.
But if they would give them my schedule, I'll be there. I sure would.
All right. I hope the breakdown will be able to be quick, all right? I'm fast.